Hello, guys. Monster Master Godzilla here. And oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. It's Friday the 13th. That's right. Friday the 13th. And oh my goodness, what would be a better video to do for Friday the 13th? Well, make a new marathon, of course. We're about to do a new marathon today. I give you the Friday-A-Thon, which the Friday-A-Thon, we will be talking about all the Friday the 13th franchise featuring the well-known masked horror movie killer, Jason Voorhees. Yes, that's right, you heard correctly. This one's about the Friday the 13th franchise, which we will be doing from the early days up till the 2009 reboot, excluding Freddy vs. Jason. So, with that said, I thought it'd be fitting to make a new video on Friday the 13th, and beginning with the classic original 1980 film Friday the 13th. Okay, here we go. Friday the 13th, the classic 1980 film. This one is a classic. One of the most iconic horror movie classics of all time. And it's during the time when the slasher genre was a huge thing in the 80s, where horror movies have been so inventive, especially in terms of killers and animatronics. So then the plot involves that a little boy named Jason had died on the camp, and he drowned as a child. The camp counselors were irresponsible. Were irresponsible. Weren't watching him. They were busy making love. And then someone ends up going after the campers. Ends up going after the camp counselors. And they end up killing them. So then, years later, camp counselors decide to go camping. Try to reopen the camp. But then someone was stalking them in through the bushes. And it started off throughout the movie looking like a man going on a murder spree, wearing boots and a flannel shirt. Because throughout the movie you thought it was a man going on a murder spree. And this is one of the movies featuring Kevin Bacon, in one of those movies before he got famous, as he is today. And Kevin Bacon, he was one of the victims of the killer. You never see who the killer is until the very end. So then, throughout the movie, there was a lot of suspense where they never show the killer's face throughout most of the movie. So the characters, they were caught making out. And that's the worst thing about being in Friday the 13th, is when you're in the camp. So throughout most of the movie, they had, in the beginning, there was a lot of people who were trying to warn him about going to the camp. But they didn't heed the warning. Even the creepy old man tried to heed their warning about that. So the main character, Alice, I think was her name, she ends up being the sole survivor of the film. And then later, throughout the final scene of the movie, we introduce Mrs. Pamela Voorhees, who is Jason's mother. And she ends up mentioning about, she was introduced as the main character. She was introduced only at the end. And she started off explaining that she was once the chef. She was once the chef at the camp. And she explains that her son Jason died at the camp, drowning as a child. But then later found out, and she explains that she was so mad that all the campers were busy making love, and they neglected Jason. So then, and the sad thing about Jason is that as a little boy, he was born deformed. And he was born deformed, which is real sad about Jason. So then it turns out, because throughout the movie, you never see what she looked like until the very end, because they could have introduced her as a character who seems very nice and awesome, nice person at first, until you find out the secret at the very end. And it turns out they actually showed her face at the end, and they found out, and then she was later revealed to be the killer, which is quite an effective reveal. So she ends up pretending to be Jason like this. Kill her, Mommy. Get her, Mommy. Pretending that he was Jason talking. So they end up going after the main character. And then the main character survived by slicing off her mother's head. Slicing off Mrs. Voorhees' head. So then old Alice ends up surviving. And she was seen sleeping on the boat, on the canoe. So then until it shows up, the police showed up, and then it turns out the zombified version of Jason as a child shows up, attacks the main character, but it turns out it was only a dream. And so the main character ends up being the survivor ends up being the sole survivor of the whole movie, and that's the end of that one. And this movie has you wishing for a lot more, and a lot of people who have forgot that Jason is not the killer in this movie. Jason does not show up as the killer until the sequel. Yeah, Jason people always associated Jason as the killer in the franchise. Yes, he is the overall main villain of the franchise. This one, the first one, the very first Friday the 13th, Jason wasn't always the killer. It was his mother who was the original killer, before Jason became the killer. So this one is the backstory of how Jason became the killer. It's all setting up for the sequels. So after this one, Jason's the killer onwards. So, and that's all I have to say, folks, and stay tuned for more. We will be reviewing Friday the 13th Part 2, which is a much better movie than this one. And I promise you, it's a better movie than this one. And once we get up to that one, you'll be amazed. I totally recommend this one. I totally recommend that one better than the first one. I mean, I do recommend checking this one out, too. I mean, but the sequel is a much better movie. But trust me. And that's all I have to say, folks. And as always, stay awesome, my Monster Masters, and stay tuned for Friday the 13th Part 2.